Confined to a hospital bed, Hansu Lee finds solace only within digital worlds. His focus narrows, eyes locked onto the screen as frantic inputs demand perfection. Frustration boils over when a clumsy AI partner ruins his hard-earned progress. He tosses the device aside, finally surrendering to the crushing weight of boredom. Endless cycles of repetitive genres blur together, offering no challenge for his mind. Online forums echo his own cynical sentiment, confirming the industry's stagnant creative state. Restless and uninspired, Hansu scans the web for a spark of genuine innovation. A curious, brutal-sounding title catches his eye amidst the sea of mediocre software. Dungeon and Stone emerges as a cryptic, indie-developed challenge from the shadows. Hesitation flickers as he notes the language barrier, yet curiosity compels him forward. With a dismissive shrug, he initiates the download, hoping for a fleeting distraction. The character selection screen greets him, presenting a roster of mysterious, pixelated avatars. Hansu selects the Barbarian, indifferent to his fleeting digital endeavor. The complex interface reveals a harsh, unforgiving world of grid-based tactical combat. Hansu studies the screen, his initial skepticism replaced by genuine artistic intrigue. Time slips away unnoticed as the late hour startles him completely. A flicker of obsession ignites within his eyes, reflecting total immersion. Strategic party management becomes the primary key to surviving these dangerous dungeons. Brutal difficulty ensures that every fatal mistake demands a punishing total reset. Frustration boils over, drawing a sharp rebuke from a nearby nurse. He offers a sheepish, apologetic smile while retreating into his headphones. Calculated maneuvers dance through his mind as he maps out safety. Scouring the desolate forums, he finds no guidance for this obscure title. Determination hardens his expression, signaling his solitary vow to conquer everything. Ordinary life fades into the background of his sterile, confined world. Hansu clutches his phone, seeking an escape from his grueling reality. Another digital demise marks the end of his latest failed attempt. Endless cycles of frustration fuel his obsession with this brutal game. Time slips away as he sacrifices his youth to the screen. A sudden, sharp intake of breath signals his long-awaited breakthrough moment. Pure, unadulterated triumph radiates from him as he reaches the pinnacle. The legendary threshold looms, silent and foreboding, before his tired eyes. He erupts in a roar of victory, silencing his inner demons. Tears of relief stream down his face after a decade-long struggle. Hesitation vanishes when the final prompt demands his absolute, unwavering commitment. With a resolute final click, he seals his fate forevermore. Hansu Lee dismisses the ominous prompt with a confident, cocky smirk. The system confirms his choice, locking the path forward into uncertainty. He leans back, treating the deadly encounter as a mere data-gathering mission. A casual laugh escapes him as the loading screen finally finishes cycling. Cryptic messages flicker across the screen, signaling the end of his training. Disbelief washes over Hansu as he stares at the screen in shock. Frustration boils over when his native language suddenly replaces the expected English. He grit his teeth, feeling his hard-earned translation work become entirely obsolete. Blinding blue energy erupts from the monitor, consuming his entire small room. Agony tears through Hansu as the virtual light pulls him toward oblivion. Panic registers in his eyes while the reality of his world dissolves. The system initiates the final transfer as Hansu Lee vanishes from his home forever. The chief commands the ritual, his arms raised high before the silent tribe. A sea of warriors watches him, their faces masked by the flickering light. Dancing flames replace the sterile glow of technology in this harsh, primitive world. Bjorn Yandel observes the terrifyingly muscular figures surrounding him in the dark woods. The bearded leader bellows, his voice shaking the very air with primal authority. Hansu Lee stands isolated, his mind grappling with the impossibility of his situation. Cold sweat beads on his forehead as he calculates his next desperate move. He inspects his own body, noting the strange, powerful physique he now inhabits. His massive, calloused fingers flex, responding perfectly to his every mental command. Bjorn stands tall, a stranger in a land defined by ancient, lethal traditions. Disbelief wars with instinct as he processes the chief's brutal, echoing demands. He watches Karak Fanon, realizing the deadly game has finally begun in earnest. Karak Fanon stands before the bearded barbarian to claim his lethal initiation weapon. Calloused fingers tighten around the cold steel, grounding him in this brutal reality. Karak hoists the heavy battle axe, officially marking his transition into a hardened tribal warrior. The chief bellows a command, signaling Einar Fenelon to approach the bloodstained altar next. Bjorn Yandel freezes, a chilling sense of déjà vu washing over his entire consciousness. Other recruits claim their armaments, their choices mirroring the tactical patterns of a game. He watches the chief recite ceremonial blessings that feel scripted from a digital screen. A blinding, ethereal light erupts, illuminating the sprawling city of Rafdonia in his mind. Bjorn gasps as the terrifying truth of his existence finally clicks into sharp focus. The name of the world flashes before his eyes like a cursed, glowing memory. He recognizes the familiar character selection interface from his past life as Hansu Lee. Hansu stares into the void, realizing he is trapped inside his own favorite game. He recalls his final, desperate steps into the boss's lethal lair. Sudden, frantic shouts shatter his concentration and pull him back. Bjorn Yandel stands trembling alongside a terrified, nameless fellow barbarian. Panic surges through him as he questions this nightmarish new reality. He studies the other man, noticing a strange, unnatural behavior. Bjorn realizes he might not be the only player trapped here. The chief descends upon them like an inescapable, vengeful shadow. His eyes lock onto the leader's predatory, all-consuming gaze. Bjorn Yandel shouts a desperate denial to escape the impending slaughter. He pivots his suspicion toward the red-haired barbarian in frustration. The red-haired barbarian stares back in pure, unadulterated confusion. The chief marks his next victim with a final, chilling decree. Panic floods the red-haired as he questions the existence of their world. The armored warrior swings his heavy blade, silencing the fool with brutal finality. Crimson spray paints the air, leaving Bjorn Yandel paralyzed by the sudden carnage. Cold dread grips his heart as he stares at the gruesome, fresh aftermath. Bjorn stands frozen beside the killer, masking his mounting horror with forced stoicism. He desperately suppresses his true fear, knowing any sign of weakness spells doom. The chief declares his victim possessed, weaving a dark narrative to justify murder. He forces the gathered warriors to discard the truth, demanding absolute, blind obedience. Bjorn stares ahead, finally grasping the lethal, hidden laws of this savage ritual. He identifies the first grim rule. Outsiders are seen as demonic, parasitic spirits. Exposure means certain death, a reality now etched into his very survival instinct. Only luck prevented his own head from joining the blood-soaked earth today. He resolves to survive the ceremony without ever revealing his true identity. The chief looms over the crowd, picking names like a grim executioner. Fear ripples through the warriors as they flinch under the heavy pressure. One by one, they are forced forward to face the lethal judgment. Bjorn sweats, desperately wishing he could access his own missing memories today. Desperation fuels his gamble. He must identify himself to stay among them. His hands clench into tight fists, bracing for the inevitable, brutal challenge. The chief bellows a name, his voice cutting through the suffocating air. Terror strikes as Bjorn realizes the clock is ticking toward his death. Silent observers watch the line, waiting for the next victim to fall. He stands alone in the arena, the entire tribe waiting for movement. Finally, he takes the first step, committing to his new, fragile life. Bjorn Yandel steels his resolve, fully embracing the lethal identity of the barbarian. Bjorn Yandel stands resolute, muscles taut under the flickering torchlight of the cavern. He strides forward with purpose, closing the distance toward the formidable tribal leader. The chief casts a piercing, golden-eyed gaze that weighs Bjorn's very soul. Flames roar behind him as he gestures toward the arsenal with savage pride. A cocky smirk pulls at his lips, signaling his total acceptance of this identity. He tightens his grip, mentally bracing for the pivotal choice that defines his future. Rows of cold steel gleam, reminding him of the harsh reality of his class. Reaching out, he bypasses the blades for the one tool that guarantees true longevity. The elderly man narrows his eyes, clearly baffled by the unexpected selection of gear. Clutching the heavy shield, he knows this defensive bastion is his ultimate survival key. A digital chime echoes as the system confirms his successful integration into the world. Reality blurs, pulling him back to the silent, solitary glow of his workspace. System logs confirm his item level has surged to 24. Bjorn Yandel reviews the stats of his initial, flawed combat strategy. Flashy greatswords proved fatal, leading him to constant, crushing defeat. Hansu Lee grapples with the frustration of his character's fragile state. He surveys an arsenal of weapons that failed to provide stability. Reliance on a berserk build left Bjorn vulnerable and dangerously inconsistent. A sudden epiphany strikes him while browsing the local merchant's wares. The armored warrior archetype offers a path to true, durable power. His eyes narrow, calculating the precise shift in his combat role. A massive detonation tears through the quiet air of the cavern. Bjorn stands firm, shield raised against the towering, monstrous threat ahead. Success flashes bright as he finally secures a hard-fought victory. Bjorn revels in the visceral feedback of his successful, hard-hitting combat maneuvers. He calmly assesses his next move, relying on cold, calculated gaming intuition. A massive wooden gate rumbles open, signaling the start of their perilous journey. The heavy barrier slams shut, trapping the group within the labyrinth's cold embrace. Bjorn stands amidst the crowd, fully aware of the grim fate awaiting them. His eyes narrow, focused intently on the treacherous path leading toward the city. The gates of Rafdonia loom high, daring the warriors to enter and survive. The elderly man bellows, urging the gathered fighters to embrace their dark destiny. A tide of desperate barbarians surges forward, driven by primal, unyielding competitive instinct. Bjorn joins the frantic stampede, masking his true intentions behind a desperate expression. He doubts the collective wisdom of this chaotic mob as they rush blindly. Sudden silence falls over the city, halting the mindless charge in its tracks. A warrior erupts in fury, branding his companions as utterly shameless and incompetent. The mob turns on their guide, demanding accountability for leading them into chaos. Einar steps forward, conceding her failed leadership with a cold, resigned finality. Radiating newfound confidence, she vows to spearhead the path toward their survival. Bjorn watches her intently, his sharp eyes calculating the risks of her ambition. Dread washes over Einar as the crushing weight of their predicament becomes undeniable. Panic ripples through the group, their desperate race against time turning into madness. Factions fracture the party, with rival voices clamoring for a different, untested leader. Bjorn stands apart, silently judging the fools who squander their final precious moments. A subtle touch breaks his concentration, drawing his attention to the troubled warrior. Einar confronts him, bracing herself for more accusations amidst the mounting tribal tension. He signals for silence, offering a secret path to those who listen closely. Einar stares back, her eyes wide with shock at his bold proposition. Bjorn gestures toward the unsuspecting group, guiding the path with calculated precision. These arrogant adventurers remain blissfully unaware of the barbarians stalking their every move. Einar nods in agreement, finally ready to commit to his dangerous plan. The tribe erupts in celebration, hailing Einar while he watches their foolishness. A massive stone tower looms ahead, casting a long, ominous shadow tonight. Violent purple energy surges outward as the labyrinth gate tears through reality. Every barbarian gazes upon the swirling vortex, their hunger for battle ignited. Cold sweat beads on his brow as the grim reality sets in. He stands alone in the spotlight, desperately craving a path of escape. Memories of a fragile life in a hospital bed haunt his mind. Fear gives way to a hardened resolve. He must survive this trial. Rafdonia enforces a brutal tax, demanding wealth or life from every citizen. Venturing into the dangerous labyrinth remains the primary method for gathering riches. Ordinary labor in the city offers a safer, yet elusive, alternative path. Bjorn Yandel stands exposed, his identity as a barbarian closing every door. Scornful voices reject him, labeling him nothing more than a mindless brute. He wonders if this reality follows different rules than the game world. A shimmering portal pulses, marking the only gateway to his potential salvation. Bjorn calculates his dwindling time as the deadline for the tax looms. Cold desperation flashes in his eyes while he weighs his limited options. Fear anchors him to the spot, preventing the necessary charge toward survival. His pulse thunders against his ribs, signaling the gravity of the choice. A sudden touch breaks his trance, jolting him back to the present. Einar Fenelon appears from the shadows, her presence demanding immediate, undivided attention. She urges Bjorn Yandel forward, revealing they're the final stragglers left behind. The unstable portal pulses with erratic energy as time rapidly bleeds away. Bjorn commands her to proceed, choosing to bear the final burden alone. Einar pauses at the threshold, offering a final, unexpected moment of gratitude. He dismisses her thanks, his stoic expression betraying nothing of his inner turmoil. Einar fixates on his intellect, desperate to uncover the secret to his wisdom. Bjorn mentally scoffs at her request, masking his cynicism with a hollow suggestion. He considers the absurdity of his situation while feigning a thoughtful, sage demeanor. She beams with newfound resolve, promising to repay his guidance after surviving. Bjorn questions the reality of her fear, comparing her to his digital memories. He stares into the void, wondering if even a barbarian truly fears death. Einar parts her lips, ready to voice a truth buried deep. She acknowledges the heavy weight of mortality with a stoic, unwavering gaze. Bjorn observes her resolve, seeing the hidden fire within his companion. His eyes narrow, reflecting a sudden shift in his internal perspective. Einar offers a final, solemn wish for his survival before they part. He tightens his grip on the shield, embracing the mantle of his role. A single step marks the beginning of his desperate, final sprint. Bjorn wears a fierce grin, masking his dread with pure, unadulterated ambition. The air crackles with energy as the portal begins its violent collapse. He plunges into the swirling void, armed with the memories of countless lives. Energy surges, consuming the path ahead as he commits to his dangerous gamble. Bjorn stares into the abyss, his expression hardened by the thrill of survival. Cold, rhythmic dripping echoes through the void as Bjorn Yandel arrives at last. His piercing gaze cuts through the oppressive darkness, searching for any sign of life. Bjorn stands alone in the suffocating silence, confused by his sudden, isolated arrival. Bjorn Yandel stands firm, his powerful frame etched with ancient tribal tattoos. The warrior scans the darkness, his sharp gaze searching for any hidden threats. He channels his latent barbarian strength, feeling the raw energy surge within him. Hansu Lee recalls his past life, utilizing every scrap of strategic game knowledge. Frustration mounts as he realizes the oppressive gloom hides the path ahead completely. He observes Einar and others, noting their shared struggle in this unforgiving place. Bjorn considers the glowing crystals, remembering they were supposed to light his way. A chilling suspicion forms as he surveys the maze of cold stone walls. Shadows cloak these outer sections, creating a death trap for any unprepared soul. An unnatural breeze whispers through the hall, defying the logic of the game. He accepts that survival here demands adapting to a reality without predictable rules. He focuses his will, desperately attempting to manifest the familiar game interface. Bjorn Yandel scans the empty air for any sign of a familiar interface. Only a heavy, mocking silence answers his desperate search for the system menus. Frustration mounts as Bjorn realizes his digital crutches have completely abandoned him here. He presses a calloused palm against the cold stone, seeking any tactile path. The warrior creeps forward, his shield raised against the encroaching, suffocating darkness. Every cautious step feels agonizingly slow in this labyrinth of shifting, jagged rock. Vigilance is his only weapon, yet he remains blind to the hidden threat. A sudden, sharp scream pierces the stagnant air, echoing through the hollow halls. Bjorn collapses as iron teeth bite deep into his flesh, anchoring him down. Crimson blood pools rapidly, marking the cruel reality of a hunter's primitive snare. He clamps his jaw shut, forcing a stifled moan into a silent, internal roar. Adrenaline surges as he knows a predator is surely stalking his wounded form. A rhythmic, crimson pulse thrums through the darkness, signaling an impending lethal encounter. Bjorn Yandel stares into the shadows, his eyes wide and glistening with cold sweat. He desperately hopes the danger has bypassed him, yet instinct screams a different truth. Rejecting the comfort of denial, he prepares his battered body for the inevitable clash. The goblin watches from the dark, its predatory gaze locked onto the wounded warrior. It waits in the silence, savoring the slow decay of its prey's physical state. Bjorn steadies his ragged breathing, forcing his mind to sharpen despite the searing agony. A grim realization settles in as he identifies the lethal toxin dulling his senses. Jagged iron teeth remain clamped tight, anchoring his leg to the cold, unforgiving stone. He grips his shield with trembling hands, choosing to initiate the assault before collapsing. Numbness creeps upward from his mangled foot, turning every step into a desperate struggle. Bjorn limps forward, furious that his hidden enemy refuses to reveal its wretched self. Bjorn Yandel roars into the darkness, challenging the unseen predator to face him. Doubt flickers in his mind, suggesting the threat might only be a hallucination. He stands as a lone, wounded silhouette against the encroaching, suffocating dungeon gloom. Bjorn gasps for air, his resolve hardening despite the exhaustion racking his body. Every dragging step leaves a bloody trail as he chooses survival over pride. Dizziness washes over him like a wave, blurring the line between man and monster. A massive, hulking shadow rises to loom over the battered and weary barbarian. Bjorn freezes as the sharp sound of a heavy footfall pierces the silence. He wears a jagged, mocking grin, baiting the stalker into a fatal mistake. Lying motionless, he strains his ears to track the creature through the dark. His mangled feet continue their rhythmic, painful shuffle across the cold stone floor. Heavy, deliberate footsteps echo behind him, signaling that the hunt has finally begun. Bjorn Yandel swings his heavy shield, forcing the cunning creature to halt. He breathes heavily, calculating the lethal dance between predator and desperate prey. The goblin sneers, savoring the slow decay of its victim's waning strength. Bjorn drags his broken feet forward, baiting the monster into a trap. Suddenly, he collapses, feigning a total failure of his battered barbarian body. He hits the cold stone, exposing his back to the approaching stalker. Bjorn keeps his eyes shut, listening for the final, fatal closing distance. The creature pauses, wary of the sudden, silent stillness of its prey. Suspicion flickers in the monster's eyes as it contemplates the easy kill. A sharp stone strikes him, a test to confirm the barbarian's demise. Bjorn winces, hiding a mocking smirk behind his mask of feigned agony. The hunt reaches its climax as the creature steps into the snare. Bjorn Yandel locks his burning gaze onto the unsuspecting creature. He erupts from the ground, finally shedding his mask of weakness. The barbarian swings his weapon with lethal, newfound intent. Shock ripples through the monster as it faces a transformed predator. Raw, crimson energy surges through his hand like a wildfire. He reaches out, channeling the overwhelming power of his barbarian form. The strike lands with a thunderous impact against the goblin. Confidence surges through him as he recognizes his absolute physical superiority. The frail life he once knew is eclipsed by this strength. Bjorn rains down brutal, calculated blows upon the crumbling creature. Each punch echoes his total dominance over the savage labyrinth. He relentlessly crushes the life out of his cornered adversary. Bjorn Yandel delivers a final, bone-shattering strike to the goblin's face. He looms over the creature, preparing to end its miserable existence. A sickening thud echoes as the barbarian crushes his target completely. The savage skirmish yields a modest reward for his lethal effort. Bjorn watches as the remains dissolve into fading, ethereal light. He gasps for air, unsettled by the familiar, digital-like decay. A tiny, glowing object clatters onto the cold stone floor. He reaches out to claim the precious, shimmering mana stone. Bjorn studies the gem, calculating its meager value in this reality. The harsh truth hits him. This treasure buys only one crust. A dark, cynical chuckle escapes his lips at the irony. He slumps against the wall, fully embracing his grim new world. Arcane energy crackles as a dragon looms over this lethal, unforgiving realm. The minotaur-like creature stands victorious while the goblin dissolves into nothingness. Bjorn Yandel observes a familiar assembly of diverse adventurers outside the city. Agonizing pain radiates from his bloodied foot with every single heavy step. He drags his broken body forward, refusing to dismiss this visceral nightmare. Relentless system warnings plague Bjorn Yandel as blood pools on the darkened earth. He drags his broken frame forward, desperate to escape this lethal, unforgiving wilderness. Bjorn gasps for air, his eyes burning with the sheer intensity of his agony. Trading his pride for survival, he crawls past hidden dangers to avoid further injury. A jagged metal trap looms ahead, threatening to end his journey right here. Cruel notifications chime again, reminding him that his life force is slowly draining. The crimson stain on his foot deepens, signaling a wound that refuses to clot. Exhaustion threatens to consume him, forcing an urgent search for potential allies nearby. With every agonizing inch, he pulls himself toward a sliver of hope ahead. Dark memories surface of a fallen comrade, lost to the brutal, tribal blade. He wonders if that tragic end meant true death or a strange rebirth. Yet, the relentless system pings continue, demanding he fight through the encroaching darkness. Relentless system pings hammer into his consciousness, marking his rapid decline. Critical health levels flash in red, signaling a dire, final countdown. Bjorn Yandel gasps, desperate for a salvation that feels worlds away today. He drags his broken body forward, painting the cold stone with crimson. A flicker of light ahead offers a fragile, flickering promise of survival. Bjorn stares into the distance, his vision blurring from the agonizing exertion. The exhausted warrior kneels, suddenly confronted by a mocking, spectral version of himself. Cruel words echo within his mind, questioning the worth of his struggle. He wheezes, forcing his battered limbs to crawl across the unforgiving floor. Dark thoughts warn of lurking monsters, yet he clings to his purpose. His mind fractures under the strain, teetering on the edge of oblivion. Bjorn defies the internal voices, screaming his refusal to surrender to death. Bjorn Yandel collapses, his body finally surrendering to the crushing weight of exhaustion. A flicker of luminescence pierces the gloom, offering a desperate, glimmering promise. System alerts signal that his vitality is slipping into a perilous, terminal decline. Blue eyes burn with intensity as he gasps for air against the agony. Startled adventurers peer down into the shadows, discovering the broken warrior among them. Hanze gestures toward the floor, alerting Drouse to the dying man's presence. Unrelenting blood loss triggers a hidden potential, sharpening his spirit amidst the pain. Bjorn demands assistance, his voice ragged yet fueled by a defiant, burning spark. The party gazes down in disbelief at the newcomer who outpaced their journey. A guttural snarl escapes his lips, reflecting a soul that refuses to fade. The armored warrior observes the scene, his expression unreadable as he weighs his options. A faint, knowing smirk crosses the warrior's face as he acknowledges the struggle. The armored warrior kneels, urging Laren Erzina to save the dying man. Laren coldly rejects the request, her resolve against aiding the barbarian absolute. He accepts the rejection, his composure masking a calculated shift in plans. Turning toward Mammern, the armored warrior demands a potion for the wounded. A gloved hand tosses the vial, signaling a reluctant concession to necessity. He prepares the treatment, warning Bjorn of the brutal sting to come. Crimson liquid washes over Bjorn, igniting his flesh with violent, forced vitality. The system confirms the rapid mending, yet the cost is sheer agony. Bjorn screams as the artificial restoration tears through his shattered nervous system. Every fiber of his being feels caught in a horrific, internal detonation. He finally understands why such potent medicine is forbidden during the heat of combat. The empty vial hits the stone, leaving only the sound of ragged gasps. Bjorn Yandel collapses, his body trembling against the harsh, unforgiving stone floor. The warrior struggles to remain upright as his battered frame fights for stability. Surviving the impossible, he stares ahead with eyes reflecting a harrowing, near-death experience. Hanze looms over him, demanding answers about his inexplicable and sudden arrival. Bjorn realizes the true motivation behind the stranger's intervention during his darkest hour. He scoffs at the inquiry, admitting he has no secret knowledge of the terrain. Hanze considers the rare, century-old anomaly of spawning within such a dangerous zone. Bjorn questions the extreme rarity of his situation with a look of disbelief. Laren Erzina and her companion represent a level of expertise he has yet to reach. He rises to his feet, dismissing the conversation as they move deeper inside. The armored warrior offers a calculated gesture of goodwill, covering the cost of aid. Bjorn understands that every second spent here carries a heavy financial price. Bjorn Yandel reflects on the unexpected kindness of his temporary traveling companions. Darkness swallows the path, mirroring his internal struggle with this newfound dependency. He forces his battered, bloodied hand to maintain a firm grip on his shield. Bjorn stands tall, his pride wounded by the suffocating weight of their pity. The party marches deeper, their rhythmic steps echoing against the cold, jagged tunnel walls. Adventurers whisper cynical remarks, questioning the true nature of his survival and luck. They debate the motives behind the aid provided to the struggling barbarian warrior. Laren Erzina remains stoic, hiding her true thoughts behind a mask of indifference. Hena fiercely defends her companion, shielding her from the harsh scrutiny of others. She lectures Hanze on the social nuances displayed by the observant Drouse. Hanze offers a mocking grin, clearly unimpressed by the group's sudden moral posturing. The trail of blood persists, marking Bjorn's painful journey through the unforgiving labyrinth. Hena and Hanze debate the sheer tenacity of the wounded barbarian. Drouse identifies a hidden path, proving his worth as a master wayfinder. Laren Erzina questions if such immense cartographic knowledge is truly common for wayfinders. A sudden, sharp realization flickers across the blonde adventurer's face. The party stands before an untouched portal, marking their status as explorers. A gloved hand reaches out to test the ancient, stone-bound surface. Blinding radiance erupts, consuming the cavern as the gateway finally awakens. The blonde adventurer grins, eager to conquer the mysteries of the second floor. Hena advances with caution, sensing something amiss near the shimmering portal. The older man in robes halts the group with a cryptic, silent warning. A blood-soaked sandal lies discarded near a trap, confirming Bjorn Yandel's brutal passage. The older man in robes channels raw power, sealing their grim discovery away. Magical light reveals a gruesome path of blood staining the cold cave walls. The adventurers stare in stunned, silent disbelief at the harrowing evidence of struggle. Drouse and the older man in robes calculate the impossible distance Bjorn traversed. A dark, grim fascination flickers in the older man's eyes at such endurance. Hena turns to the armored warrior, her voice trembling with genuine, shaken disbelief. Mammern Patron recalls the barbarian's iron-willed posture during their previous, fateful meeting. Mammern gazes down at the broken form of Bjorn Yandel with newfound, heavy respect. A bloodied hand remains tightly clenched around the radiant, precious mana stone. The armored warrior observes the grim relic, finally understanding the depth of resolve. A smirk forms on the man's face as he reevaluates his past arrogance. Sheer, indomitable willpower defines the legacy of this survivor against all grim odds. Bjorn roars against the dying light, refusing to succumb to the encroaching darkness. Bjorn slams his fist down, shattering the ground with pure, unadulterated fury. Bjorn Yandel unleashes his fury, crushing the creature with a brutal shield strike. He maintains his aggressive momentum, slamming the steel barrier into another encroaching foe. System notifications confirm the steady elimination of his relentless, green-skinned attackers. Bjorn wipes blood from his face, finding these constant skirmishes increasingly trivial. Careless traps litter the path, showcasing the amateurish incompetence of his enemies. Another goblin lunges from the shadows, its desperate ambush failing to catch him. He counters with a swift, punishing blow, shattering the goblin's skull instantly. Beyond the endless combat, a more primal concern begins to take hold. Bjorn curses his empty stomach, the grueling pace draining his remaining energy reserves. Sudden clarity strikes as he remembers a vital provision gifted by the chief. His blood-soaked fingers tighten around the small, red pouch held within his grasp. Heart racing, he prepares to consume the life-saving sustenance hidden inside. Bjorn Yandel stares in disbelief at the empty, useless pouch. Desperation drives him to tear into the final, meager rations. He rations every bite, knowing his survival remains precarious here. Even dry bread tastes divine to a man starving underground. Thirst begins to claw at his throat with cruel intensity. Bjorn wonders if water even exists in this crystalline nightmare. The cold interface mocks him with its detached, digital indifference. Hansu Lee laments the brutal reality of his new existence. He trudges forward through the dark, searching for any salvation. A rhythmic sound breaks the silence, promising a hidden oasis. Hope surges as he races toward the faint, trickling melody. Bjorn freezes, discovering a lone figure huddled in the dark. Hanze glances back, his expression guarded within the cavern's dim, crystalline light. Bjorn Yandel stands amidst the glowing formations, his blood-stained frame radiating raw, primal intensity. The stranger retreats into the shadows, leaving Bjorn alone in the silent, shimmering expanse. Fingers caked in dried gore carefully tally the haul of jagged, crimson dungeon shards. Exhaustion weighs heavily on him as he sits amidst his hard-won, glittering treasure pile. Bjorn lets out a ragged yawn, his body screaming for rest after brutal skirmishes. He looms over potential allies, offering a desperate pact to ensure their mutual survival. The two adventurers recoil in terror, clearly unsettled by his imposing, battle-worn presence. Panic surges through the pair as they scramble away from his unwanted, bloody proposal. Rejection stings when another group turns their backs, leaving Bjorn isolated once again. Disgust radiates from the man with curly hair, who finds the barbarian's scent unbearable. Bjorn stands perfectly still, a silent monolith waiting for a path through this madness. Bjorn Yandel grinds his teeth, his patience finally snapping under the weight of rejection. He stalks toward a potential lead, desperate to secure any form of temporary alliance. Hans approaches with a beaming smile, offering a peculiar proposition to the weary barbarian. Bjorn stares in utter confusion, completely baffled by the stranger's strange request for companionship. Hans explains his desire for a strong protector to guard him while he sleeps. Bjorn realizes this might be the only way to survive the night in safety. Hansu Lee ponders the odd, suggestive phrasing that seems to follow him everywhere lately. Bjorn Yandel extends a blood-stained hand, formally sealing their unlikely and desperate pact. Hans shakes his hand firmly, already outlining the logistics of their new night arrangement. A flushed Hans makes an unsettling suggestion that catches the barbarian entirely off guard. Bjorn breaks into a cold sweat, repulsed by the strange intensity in his partner's eyes. He begrudgingly agrees, snatching his hand back as the bizarre game begins immediately. Hans sets the terms for their rest, claiming the first watch. Bjorn Yandel accepts his defeat, feeling the weight of his own misfortune. He stares at the complex device, mocking the ignorance of his barbarian persona. Hans taunts the bloodied warrior, reveling in his perceived intellectual superiority over him. Bjorn clutches the watch, already plotting how to weaponize such petty social biases. The adventurer drifts into a deep sleep, seemingly unbothered by their hostile surroundings. Bjorn watches over his sleeping companion, silently envying the warmth of his gear. The barbarian stifles a yawn, growing restless in the suffocating silence of waiting. He grips the timepiece tightly, desperate for the agonizing crawl of time to accelerate. The relentless ticking of the watch echoes through the dark, empty cavern space. Bjorn finally breaks the stillness, rousing Hans from his peaceful, deep slumber. The pair confirms the uneventful night, leaving the lingering tension largely unresolved. Bjorn Yandel establishes the shift rotation, granting his weary ally some much-needed rest. A flicker of doubt crosses Hans's gaze as the heavy silence stretches thin. Anxiety gnaws at the adventurer, making any attempt at true relaxation feel impossible. Hans studies the barbarian, weighing the risks of trusting a total stranger tonight. The cavern resonates with a rhythmic, thunderous snoring that echoes off the crystals. Bjorn remains sprawled on the cold stone, seemingly lost in a deep slumber. He breathes heavily, perfectly mimicking the exhaustion of a warrior after a brawl. A single eye cracks open, scanning the dark to ensure his ruse holds. Hans believes his manipulation is successful, underestimating the intelligence of his sleeping companion. Bjorn shifts his weight, further convincing the observer that the barbarian is unconscious. The adventurer smiles, fully convinced his calculated gamble has finally paid off tonight. Vigilance suddenly returns as the supposed sleeper rises with lethal, silent precision. Bjorn Yandel observes his companion's total lack of movement for 2 hours. Hans sleeps soundly, his rhythmic breathing mocking the exhaustion consuming the barbarian. He remains seated on the cold rock, unable to trust his temporary partner. Fatigue claws at his resolve, yet he refuses to succumb to the darkness. Each heavy eyelid fights a losing battle against the crushing weight of exhaustion. Sudden, piercing intensity snaps his focus back to the immediate, lethal reality. Hans stirs, his facade of innocence failing to hide a lingering, opportunistic grin. Bjorn spits out a sharp remark, cutting through the thick, deceptive morning air. The adventurer feigns a polite apology while masking his true, predatory intentions here. He stares down his companion, searching for a single crack in that mask. Hans flashes a wide, empty smile that fails to reach his calculating eyes. Bjorn accepts the hollow offer, his mind already preparing for the next betrayal. Hans offers a friendly proposal, masking his true intent with a practiced smile. He spins a tale of gratitude, painting himself as the victim of circumstance. Bjorn Yandel listens, his instincts screaming that this kindness is a deadly trap. The adventurer continues his charade, feigning humility to lower the barbarian's sharp guard. Exhaustion drags Bjorn down as he collapses, vulnerable and exposed in the dark. Sudden movement snaps his eyes open, signaling the end of his brief respite. Hans looms over him, his expression twisted into a predatory, joyful grin. The man with shoulder-length hair raises a heavy hammer to crush his prey. Bjorn stares up in shock, realizing his fatal mistake as the strike descends. Bjorn Yandel senses a lethal presence looming directly above his head. A heavy hammer narrowly misses, forcing him into a desperate roll. He pivots on his heel, sliding across the grit with precision. Hans recoils in sheer disbelief at the sudden, violent escalation. Bjorn drops into a low, predatory stance, shield ready for impact. His eyes narrow, radiating a cold, calculated hunger for the fight. Desperation fuels the attacker's retreat as he scrambles away in panic. Bjorn slams his shield into the armored warrior with brutal force. The armored warrior gasps, choking on the copper taste of blood. A heavy, ironclad boot descends, marking the end of the line. Pleading for mercy, the broken soldier finds no solace in Bjorn. He coldly weighs the warrior's durability before preparing the final strike. Bjorn Yandel unleashes a devastating shield bash against his treacherous opponent. The panicked attacker is sent sprawling across the cold, unforgiving dungeon floor. Bjorn stalks toward the broken man with lethal, measured steps. He towers over the cowering figure, casting a shadow of absolute dread. Desperation twists the man's face as he begs for his life. Bjorn demands an explanation for the cowardly, unprovoked ambush he endured. Greed drove the pathetic thief to target Bjorn's valuable mana stones. The assailant reveals his envy for the barbarian's high-quality gear. Bjorn remains unmoved by the frantic pleas for a quick release. A swift, brutal kick sends the man reeling in agony. Bjorn stomps the ground, signaling he has run out of patience. The terrified captive finally confesses his true, hidden objective. Bjorn Yandel stares down, his face hardening as the chilling truth finally surfaces. The desperate captive reveals that his own kind are hunting him for profit. A dark market thrives, turning the anatomy of a warrior into mere ingredients. He realizes he is nothing more than a high-value monster to these scavengers. Bjorn stands as a lethal obstacle, mirroring the very beasts he often hunts. Every drop of his blood represents a fortune to the greedy and ruthless. He questions why the coward waited so long to strike at his life. Terror grips the man as he begs for a mercy he never deserved. Bjorn looms over the broken figure, his presence casting a long, suffocating shadow. A cruel, knowing smile spreads across his blood-splattered face at the pathetic plea. He calmly accepts that this cycle of violence will continue without any end. Bjorn wonders if he should simply let these parasites walk away alive today. The panicked attacker desperately pleads for his life, sensing his imminent, inevitable end. Bjorn Yandel looms over the trembling man, raising his weapon with cold, calculated precision. Desperation fuels the attacker's final, hollow promises of wealth in exchange for survival. A lifeless hand drops into the dark, wet pool of a fresh kill. Bjorn stands in the silence, the weight of his first human life finally settling. The interface pulses, confirming that his spirit has hardened through this brutal, dark deed. System prompts flood his vision, rewarding the cold efficiency of his newfound, lethal path. Bjorn Yandel stands fully armed, his silhouette transformed by the spoils of the dead. Every piece of scavenged gear marks his steady departure from a life of weakness. He meticulously catalogs the essential tools required to master this unforgiving, labyrinthine world. The bloodstained warhammer serves as a grim testament to his survival and evolution. Bjorn ventures deeper into the darkness, walking alone as a predator reborn tonight. Bjorn Yandel slams his heavy warhammer into the skull of a charging goblin. He questions his initial gear choices while catching his breath after the brutal skirmish. Two snarling goblins emerge from the shadows, locking their sights on the lone warrior. Bjorn tightens his grip, noting the increasing frequency of these coordinated, deadly monster attacks. The creatures shriek, lunging forward with jagged blades to tear through his defenses. He pivots, driving his shield into the first goblin with bone-crushing, absolute force. With a savage follow-up, he shatters the second monster beneath his powerful weapon. Exhaustion finally takes hold as the warrior collapses, his body heavy with lingering fatigue. Sleep deprivation clouds his mind, forcing him to prioritize rest over further dungeon exploration. He leans against the cold stone, calculating that goblins remain safer foes than adventurers. Frustration boils over, his eyes narrowing as he realizes the dungeon offers no respite. The cycle of violence continues, forcing him to face yet another pair of enemies. Bjorn Yandel swings his heavy hammer, venting his frustration at the relentless goblins. He leans against the cold stone wall, desperate to finally find a quiet sanctuary. Exhaustion pulls at his eyelids as he prays for just a few fleeting moments. A sharp blade pierces his flesh, shattering the silence of his brief, treacherous slumber. Fury ignites in his eyes as he realizes the danger has caught him unawares. With a roar of pure rage, he crushes the skull of the attacking creature. The impact sends the stunned creature reeling backward from the sheer, overwhelming force. Bjorn stands panting, his gaze locked onto the next threat lurking in the dark. He looms over the trembling enemy, his presence alone forcing it to recoil back. His stamina is spent, yet he watches the coward flee into the deep shadows. Blood trickles from his chest, marking how close he came to a fatal end. He unscrews a potion, needing to mend his body before the cycle begins again. Bjorn Yandel winces as the restorative potion burns through his fresh, jagged wound. He wanders the silent labyrinth, weary from hours of isolation and growing internal paranoia. Finding a fellow barbarian remains his only sliver of hope for genuine, safe companionship. Two strangers approach, but their human faces instantly trigger Bjorn's deep-seated survival instincts. The human adventurer offers a partnership, oblivious to the suspicion clouding Bjorn's sharp eyes. He glares at the persistent human, rejecting the invitation with cold, calculated, silent disdain. Bjorn bluntly refuses, explaining that only his own kind can truly earn his trust. The adventurer questions this obsession, unaware of the brutal lessons Bjorn has already learned. Most barbarians have already descended, leaving Bjorn stranded in a sea of untrustworthy faces. As they part ways, he contemplates abandoning his search for a fellow tribal warrior. His expression hardens into a mask of grim determination amidst the suffocating dungeon gloom. He concludes that any non-human race is a safer bet than another treacherous human. Bjorn Yandel narrows his eyes as a sudden movement ripples through the shadows. He discovers a fragile elf huddling alone in the cold, cavernous depths. The startled creature recoils, her eyes wide with fear at the sudden intrusion. She trembles under his intense gaze, visibly shaken by the unexpected encounter. Fate finally presents him with the rare opportunity he has been hunting for. A terrified elf woman cowers, trembling as she senses an immediate, looming threat. Her eyes widen in absolute panic, searching the darkness for a way to escape. Bjorn Yandel looms over the fragile captive, casting a long, intimidating shadow inside. She grips her bow tightly, bracing for the worst from the hulking barbarian figure. Bjorn narrows his gaze, his analytical mind stripping away the surface-level fear here. Crimson blood stains her waist, marking a wound clearly not made by common monsters. He lowers his voice, questioning if a human assailant caused this brutal, jagged injury. The cavern echoes with silence as the massive warrior stands ready for her response. Sudden movement breaks the stillness as she drops to her knees in desperation. Clasping her hands together, the injured elf begs for mercy from her perceived executioner. Bjorn recoils in genuine bewilderment, struggling to process the bizarre plea before him. Tears stream down her face while she invokes a sibling to save her life. Bjorn Yandel observes the trembling captive, baffled by this unexpected display of cowardice. He shifts his posture, hoping a gentle expression might de-escalate the tense situation. A forced, awkward smile stretches across his face in a desperate attempt at diplomacy. Terror widens the elf woman's eyes, her gaze locking onto the barbarian with pure dread. Bjorn looms over her, his attempt at reassurance only deepening her paralyzing, primal fear. She continues to weep, begging the towering warrior to spare her fragile, mortal life. Frustration mounts as Bjorn curses the brutal reputation that precedes his current physical form. He sighs heavily, lamenting how his clumsy efforts at kindness have backfired so spectacularly. With a quick motion, he tosses medical supplies toward the cowering, confused elf woman. The licho herb and bandages land, serving as his only bridge toward potential peace. Stunned, she stares at the items, unable to comprehend the barbarian's sudden, uncharacteristic mercy. Bjorn maintains his stoic gaze, hiding his true strategic motives behind a cold exterior. The elf woman remains cautious, clutching the supplies as she offers to watch. Bjorn quickly clarifies his intentions, eager to avoid any misunderstanding of his motives. A jagged, bloody wound mars her side, revealing the severity of her condition. Deep exhaustion shadows her golden eyes, betraying the toll of their recent struggle. He observes her delicate features, recognizing how vulnerable she appears to lurking threats. Discarded bandages and herbs lie stained, marking the end of their makeshift treatment. She fidgets nervously under his gaze, signaling that her defenses are finally crumbling. Bjorn Yandel stands firm, declaring his identity to bridge the gap between them. A soft blush colors her cheeks as she finally whispers her name, Erwin. They sit amidst the crystals, two wary souls confronting their deep-seated racial prejudices. Visions of ancient, brutal warfare flash before them, defining their people's bloody history. These two races are locked in a cycle of hatred and endless conflict. Bjorn Yandel suddenly recalls the harsh reality of this altered game world. Erwin Fornak's ID, Tertia trembles, desperate to distance herself from ancient, bloody conflicts. He observes her anxiety, calculating that his survival outweighs any lingering social awkwardness. A flicker of genuine hope illuminates Erwin's face at his unexpected reassurance. Bjorn presses the advantage, formally proposing a temporary alliance for the night. Hansu Lee masks his exhaustion, framing their cooperation as a mutual necessity. The elf pauses, weighing the danger against the safety of his companionship. Barbarian culture prizes honor above all, a code he must now weaponize. Erwin demands a solemn oath, hoping to bind his wild nature with words. She pledges her clan's name, while he dismisses the concept yet accepts. Agreement reached, he insists on setting one final boundary before proceeding further. Bjorn Yandel finally asserts his identity, demanding to be recognized as himself. Bjorn Yandel stands firm, anchoring his wild spirit with a solemn warrior's vow. Daria Whitember D. Tertia watches as Erwin Fornak's ID Tertia binds her clan's pride. Mutual distrust fades into a fragile peace, allowing the pair to finally rest. They negotiate the night shift, trading vulnerability for a sliver of much-needed security. He entrusts her with a precious relic, sealing their pact with shared responsibility. Bjorn collapses, his exhaustion warring with the deep-seated instinct to remain ever vigilant. Sudden alertness snaps him awake, his senses piercing through the heavy, dark silence. Time slips away while he slumbers, leaving him disoriented and slightly embarrassed, too. He wipes away the evidence of his sleep, lamenting his failure to observe her. Offering his own gear, he chooses to prioritize her comfort over his tactical advantage. A soft blanket brings a rare, genuine flush to her guarded, elegant features. She settles in at last, leaving him to stand guard in the quiet. Erwin drifts into a deep slumber, completely oblivious to the surrounding peril. Bjorn recognizes the clear signs of exhaustion etched onto the sleeping elf's face. Bjorn Yandel reflects on the grueling 3 days spent deep within the labyrinth. He contemplates his former life and the strange reality of his existence. Isolation becomes a shield, hardening his resolve to survive this brutal world. Checking his watch, he prepares to rouse his companion for the journey. Hesitation lingers, forcing him to grant her a few more precious minutes. Bjorn weighs the tactical necessity of keeping the skilled archer nearby. Including her in his plans could prove vital for their mutual survival. Her vulnerability is a stark contrast to the violence awaiting them outside. Confident in his own combat prowess, he considers the risks of fighting. Hansu Lee remains locked in a strategic struggle between protection and greed. Bjorn Yandel watches two suspicious explorers closing in on his hidden position. The hunters recognize the prize they have been tracking through the dark labyrinth. Bjorn turns with a sharp, defensive glare toward the encroaching pair of strangers. They taunt the barbarian about his strange choice of a sleeping elf companion. Blue flames ignite in his eyes as he shuts down their prying questions. A sudden, lethal aura forces the two explorers to recoil in genuine terror. He dismisses their intrusion with a cold, sharp smirk of warning. Moving quickly, he returns to the safety of the glowing crystal cave. Bjorn feels the weight of the encroaching threat hunting for the sleeping elf. He desperately shakes Erwin Fornaxi D. Tertia to wake her from her slumber. Erwin pulls her blanket tighter, completely oblivious to the danger surrounding them. Frustration boils over as he struggles to comprehend her stubborn, lethal lethargy. Bjorn Yandel shakes his companion, demanding she rise from her slumber. A pained groan escapes the elf as she stirs under the blanket. Bjorn observes the suspicious way she hides her face from him. Suddenly, a sharp movement catches his eye amidst the dim cavern. He forcefully yanks the cover away, revealing a startled Erwin. The warrior looms over her, demanding the truth about her deception. Tears well in Erwin Fornaxi D. Tertia's eyes as she confesses her fear. Bjorn coldly reminds himself that their partnership is merely a temporary necessity. He grips his shield, pressing her for answers regarding their recent attackers. Erwin desperately denies any connection to the figures who hunted them. Bjorn suspects these enemies share a dark guild affiliation with his pursuer. She finally identifies the mysterious emblem as the dreaded Crystal Union. Bjorn Yandel weighs the lethal implications of facing a coordinated criminal organization. He observes Erwin Fornaxi D. Tertia, noting her extreme youth and obvious vulnerability. The pair turns away, seeking a safer path through the treacherous, dimly lit labyrinth. Bjorn maintains his tactical focus, while she desperately pleads for his ongoing protection. She beams with relief as they commit to sharing information during their flight. Erwin recalls the chilling moment her initial journey into the labyrinth turned sour. A sudden, ominous disturbance in the darkness jolted her from a fitful sleep. The man loomed over her, his presence suffocating the small, hidden sanctuary. His twisted, mocking smile revealed the sadistic nature of their relentless, unseen hunter. They dash through the corridors as she exposes the guild's terrifying, high-ranking influence. Her voice trembles while recounting how the pursuit left her severely wounded alone. Bjorn recoils at the impossible precision of their enemies' tracking capabilities and reach. Bjorn demands answers as Erwin reveals the sinister method behind their relentless pursuit. Erwin explains the mechanics of these artifacts, which act as lethal tracking beacons. The grim reality of a connected, real-time hunt settles deep within Bjorn. He demands to know why Erwin remains such a high-priority target for them. She hesitates, revealing that their obsession goes far beyond simple professional silence. Erwin recounts a desperate, violent act of defense that changed everything for her. Her strike landed with permanent, ruinous consequences that shocked the entire underground world. Bjorn stops dead in his tracks, struggling to comprehend the exact location struck. She blushes profusely, finally clarifying the sensitive, private nature of the injury. Erwin giggles, detailing how the damage proved entirely beyond the reach of healing. Bjorn recoils in sheer horror, finally grasping the true motive of their pursuers. He stares ahead, stunned by the chaotic, petty violence of their current situation. Erwin freezes as a sudden, sharp instinct grips her senses. Bjorn Yandel keeps his eyes forward, urging the elf to press on. She calculates the terrifying proximity of their relentless, unseen hunter. Panic surges while they sprint through the glowing, unforgiving labyrinth. He checks on her condition, desperate to maintain their frantic pace. Dark, spreading blood stains the back of her worn tunic. Despite the agony, she refuses to falter or slow down. The distance between them and the killer remains stubbornly fixed. Bjorn growls, realizing the stalker is coordinating with his guild. He weighs the brutal necessity of a lethal counterattack. Killing the man would invite a catastrophic bounty upon himself. Erwin calls out, sensing his focus drifting toward violence. Bjorn Yandel demands to know the combat capabilities of his elven companion. Erwin lists domestic chores, leaving him visibly exasperated by her misplaced priorities. He barks a clarification, desperate for any tactical advantage in their flight. Erwin strikes a confident pose, asserting her proficiency with a bow. A flicker of fire manifests as she reveals her rare elemental talent. The elf locks eyes with him, probing the darkness of his conscience. Bjorn grips his weapon tightly, offering a cold and hollow denial. Erwin stares back, her expression hardening with a grim, necessary resolve. He acknowledges her cold statement with a sharp, decisive nod of approval. Racing through the labyrinth, Bjorn proposes a temporary, pragmatic alliance. Erwin blushes, hesitating only briefly before agreeing to his lopsided terms. They continue their frantic sprint, tracking the closing distance of the killer. Bjorn Yandel realizes their desperate pace cannot shake off the relentless, stalking predator. Staring into the suffocating darkness, he knows that mindless flight ends in certain death. Bjorn skids to a halt, ordering Erwin to prepare her elemental for an ambush. They dash through the crystalline gloom, the fire spirit casting long, flickering, jagged shadows. Returning to this lethal labyrinth feels like a cruel, twisted joke of fate's design. Erwin extinguishes the flame, plunging their immediate surroundings into a cold, absolute, silent void. The pursuer emerges from the gloom, his silhouette looming like a ghost in darkness. Bjorn studies the killer, recognizing the terrifying efficiency of a seasoned and lethal hunter. He whispers a final, grim command to his companion, bracing for the coming violence. Erwin narrows her eyes, her gaze hardening with a sharp and deadly focused intent. Erwin Fornax ID Terja draws her bow, aiming true at the figure in the dark. With a sudden, violent release, she sends a lethal projectile screaming into the night. The pursuer gasps as a lethal projectile pierces his throat with sudden precision. He collapses into the darkness, leaving Bjorn and Erwin alone in the silence. Erwin stands trembling, the adrenaline of the kill washing over her weary frame. Bjorn offers a rare nod of approval, commending her quick reflexes under pressure. Bjorn Yandel kneels beside the fallen enemy to scavenge for any useful intelligence. Static fills the air as he activates the recovered device with desperate urgency. Hansu Lee broadcasts a frantic signal, knowing his allies remain his only hope. His eyes narrow, burning with a cold, calculated intensity as the plan solidifies. He issues the final rallying cry, summoning everyone to the deadly Goblin District. Bjorn Yandel scrutinizes the meager spoils left behind by their fallen foe. He assesses the modest collection of mana stones and basic combat equipment. Erwin Fornax ID Terja adjusts her new leather gear with visible hesitation. Bjorn emphasizes the superior durability of this practical, rugged survival attire. The transformation gives Erwin the hardened appearance of a true labyrinth adventurer. She seeks guidance on operating the mysterious communication device in their possession. Their fingers manipulate the mechanism until a sharp, distinct click echoes. Bjorn listens intently as a broadcast transmits a chilling, high-stakes warning. The air grows heavy with the news of a massive bounty hunt. Erwin trembles as the reality of being a hunted target sets in. Bjorn commands her to channel her spirit, preparing for immediate tactical movement. He leads her toward the second floor, racing against their inevitable pursuers. Erwin questions the wisdom of pushing forward with such a small, fragile party. Bjorn Yandel dismisses her concerns with a casual comment about their ongoing dynamic. She presses him on the lethal risks awaiting them on the second floor. Bjorn remains confident that their unique synergy will see them through the danger. Erwin flushes crimson, clearly caught off guard by his bold assessment of them. He highlights the tactical superiority of pairing a sturdy tank with ranged support. Deep uncertainty clouds her eyes as she contemplates their status as inexperienced newcomers. A chilling broadcast suddenly shatters the air, placing a massive bounty on her. Bjorn shields the terrified elf, swearing he will never abandon his chosen ally. The broadcast descends into sadistic threats, promising horrific consequences for any failed capture. Erwin fights through her paralyzing fear, choosing to trust in his iron resolve. He finds the timing convenient, sparing him the effort of convincing his hesitant ally. Bjorn Yandel guides the trembling Erwin deeper into the dangerous, shadowed labyrinth. A calculated smirk crosses his face as he contemplates their strategic alliance. Erwin struggles to suppress her anxiety while clinging to their fragile hope. He recognizes that protecting her serves his own interests perfectly in this world. Bjorn and Erwin venture deeper into the labyrinth, searching for the path ahead. Bjorn realizes the dungeon's shifting darkness acts as a beacon toward the hidden portal. Suddenly, Erwin halts, her eyes widening at a discovery in the gloom. Bjorn spots a lethal goblin trap waiting to ensnare the unwary travelers. He recalls the painful sting of a similar trap from his past experiences. A sudden realization strikes him regarding the strange scarcity of light and enemies. Erwin playfully scolds him while insisting on taking point to conserve his strength. He warns her to save her precious mana and rely on physical weaponry. Erwin Fornax ID Terja flushes red, caught off guard by his sudden scrutiny. She moves with painful rigidity, desperately trying to avoid the lethal bear trap. Violent shrieks erupt as two goblins ambush the unsuspecting elf from the shadows. Erwin reacts instantly, leaping backward to narrowly escape the creature's jagged, rusted blade. Her boots slide across the cavern floor as she stabilizes her precarious footing. Dropping to one knee, she readies her bow to counter the aggressive assault. A well-placed arrow strikes true, forcing the charging goblin to stumble backward midair. Another vicious creature dashes forward, closing the distance with predatory, bone-chilling speed. The snarling foe lunges, its eyes burning with a primal, bloodthirsty hunger. Erwin draws her bowstring taut, locking onto the enemy with lethal, icy precision. A brilliant flash of light erupts as she unleashes the deadly, piercing projectile. Blood sprays across the dark chamber as the arrow finds its final mark. Erwin beams with radiant confidence, seeking validation for her lethal display of skill. Bjorn Yandel acknowledges her prowess, impressed by the elf's surprising efficiency in combat. 2 glowing mana stones are presented as the spoils of their recent victory. She suggests a lopsided split, eager to secure the majority for her partner. Dreams of a special gift for her sibling ignite a sparkle in her eyes. Bjorn remains stoic, silently questioning if her cheerful demeanor masks a hidden agenda. A sudden, cold realization washes over her as the gravity of their situation shifts. He carries her through the shadows, dismissing the threat of any pursuers finding them. Digital whispers from other explorers fill the air, revealing their desperate, scattered movements. Bjorn senses an unnatural calm, fearing his luck is about to run dry. Rotting horrors emerge from the darkness, their guttural snarls shattering the peaceful silence. He stares in disbelief, knowing these monsters have no business haunting this northern sector. Bjorn Yandel scans the shadows, fearing they have strayed into the southern sector. Erwin trembles, dreading another desperate struggle against these encroaching horrors alone. He grips his weapon tight, insisting they stand together to maximize their survival odds. Knowledge is his armor, as he treats every new monster like a missing entry. Bjorn coordinates their defense, positioning himself to absorb the brunt of the assault. He advances cautiously, testing the boundaries of the monster's lethal reach. Glowing eyes ignite in the gloom as the predators lunge with mindless hunger. Relief washes over him. The familiar, predictable patterns of the ghouls remain unchanged. He intercepts the leading beast, slamming his steel into its rotting chest. The barbarian pivots, his massive frame generating a violent, sweeping arc of force. Impact echoes through the cavern, crushing the monster beneath his calculated, brutal strike. He remains cold and focused, dissecting the enemy's simplistic movements with ease. A swift arrow finds its mark, pinning the ghoul mid-lunge. Erwin smiles, her steady hand holding the bow with lethal grace. Experience points flicker, confirming their progress through the dark, unforgiving dungeon. Fresh, crimson splatters stain the cold stone, marking a disturbing trail ahead. Bjorn and Erwin examine the evidence of a mysterious struggle discovered nearby. Deep suspicion crosses Bjorn Yandel's face as he processes the grim discovery. A discarded sandal rests beside a jagged trap, whispering of past violence. Bjorn stands motionless, finally recognizing the site of his own initial arrival. His eyes narrow as the cruel irony of his placement fully dawns. Before them, a glowing portal hums, mocking their long, arduous journey. The crushing weight of regret leaves the barbarian sprawled on the ground. Bjorn looks up at Erwin, his expression twisted by pure, unadulterated frustration. Bjorn Yandel erupts in fury, leaving his companion trembling in pure terror. He curses his abysmal luck while pacing in a state of absolute agitation. Erwin Fornax ID Tertia cowers, desperately seeking to appease the volatile barbarian warrior. Bjorn demands an explanation for her confusion, his patience wearing dangerously thin now. Daria Whitember D. Tertia stares in shock as she deciphers his grim situation. Erwin whispers a prayer for the dead, unaware of his true, cynical nature. Bjorn refocuses their mission, demanding total commitment to their dangerous dungeon ascent. They step together into the shimmering light, leaving their past failures behind. The system confirms their arrival within the deadly, overgrown territory of goblins. The dungeon gate seals their fate within the treacherous forest of goblins. Bjorn Yandel and his elven companion plummet through the dark, unforgiving void. They crash into the forest floor with a jarring, bone-shaking impact. Bjorn struggles to suppress the crushing nausea blooming in his gut. She marvels at the strange sensation, her curiosity momentarily outweighing the danger. Bjorn surveys the grim, shadowy expanse of this lethal northern territory. Starlight filters through the canopy, revealing an eerie, silent wilderness around them. Erwin Fornax ID Tertia questions the geography of this hostile, unknown realm. Vicious goblins lurk within the thicket, waiting for a moment to strike. Predatory beasts prowl the eastern nests, hungry for any unwary traveler's flesh. Rotting horrors infest the western plains, eager to claim new, undead souls. Massive stone guardians stand ready in the south, crushing all who intrude. Erwin Fornak's ID Tertia beams with excitement regarding the labyrinth's converging portal mechanics. Bjorn Yandel seeks clarity on their escape route from this perilous, shifting dungeon. She calmly explains the involuntary extraction process that occurs once time finally expires. Adventurers rely on strict time limits to survive the relentless, closing labyrinth floors. Bjorn doubts the fractured crystal union will risk a descent into this level. He proposes a tactical exploration rather than waiting idly by the exit portal. The pair ventures deeper into the dark, foreboding woods under her expert guidance. Erwin notes that the eerie forest triggers a strange sense of ancient nostalgia. She compares the lethal environment to her sacred grounds while he remains indifferent. Danger lurks beneath their feet as she warns him of hidden, deadly traps. Another lethal mechanism is revealed, camouflaged perfectly against the natural, dark forest floor. Bjorn watches closely as she expertly clears the path of hidden, lethal threats. A sharp click echoes as the hidden trap snaps shut instantly. Bjorn Yandel watches the elf, impressed by her precise scouting skills. He narrows his eyes, contemplating the deeper dangers of this forest. Bjorn warns her that overconfidence is a quick path to death. The elf bristles at his cold dismissal of her hard work. He remains stoic, reminding her that duty demands absolute, focused perfection. A sudden, unexpected blush spreads across the elf's surprised face. She giggles, while he silently plots to manipulate her fragile ego. Bjorn notes the silence, finding the lack of hostiles deeply suspicious. They push forward together, venturing deeper into the dark, uncharted woods. Shadows hide goblins, though skilled warriors remain rare in these parts. They resolve to hug the portal, limiting their risk of exposure. Bjorn Yandel demands a methodical approach to clear the surrounding area of lethal traps. Erwin triggers a hidden snare with a rock, ensuring their path remains safely clear. He offers a firm nod of approval while she celebrates their tactical, cautious progress. Suddenly, the elf freezes as an unseen danger commands her undivided, sharp attention. Erwin signals a warning, her instincts detecting goblins lurking within the dark woods. Bjorn gauges the threat level, listening to her report of a small, nearby pack. She whispers that their presence remains hidden, awaiting his command for the next move. He confirms their intent to engage, questioning the limits of her impressive stealth abilities. Bjorn locks eyes with his partner, signaling that they will execute their proven strategy. Every heavy footfall is carefully placed, muffling their advance through the dense forest floor. He watches in silence, truly impressed by her uncanny ability to move without sound. The duo finally spots the unsuspecting goblins huddled together in the dim, cold light. Erwin Fornak's ID Tertia signals her partner from the shadows of the trees. She draws her bow, leveling an arrow at the unsuspecting goblin party ahead. A single, lethal projectile whistles through the air, piercing the heavy, silent gloom. Bjorn Yandel thunders forward, his heavy boots shaking the cold, unforgiving dungeon floor. The pair surveys the chaos, unsure if the initial strike found its mark. Bjorn shouts a frantic command, urging his elf ally to retreat immediately. A vicious tide of monsters surges forward, their guttural snarls echoing through the dark. He grits his teeth, bracing for the inevitable collision with the encroaching swarm. The presence of a seasoned swordsman among the horde signals a deadly escalation. Fear vanishes as an ancient, primal rhythm begins to pulse within his chest. His biological heart surrenders to the overwhelming, savage instincts of a true barbarian. Bjorn unleashes a primal roar, driving his shield into the heart of battle. Bjorn crushes the goblin with a devastating blow from his heavy shield. Bjorn realizes he is being swarmed by goblins closing in from both sides. Bjorn unleashes his raw barbarian strength to crush the incoming goblin swarm. Bjorn swings his heavy shield to swat away another goblin with brutal force. Bjorn delivers a crushing blow, leaving the remaining goblins reeling from his relentless assault. Bjorn silences the goblin's shrill cry with a brutal and decisive strike. Bjorn narrowly dodges a lethal blade as the goblin lunges from the shadows. Bjorn skids across the floor, narrowly avoiding a fatal strike from the goblin. Bjorn regains his footing as a relentless swarm of goblins closes in fast. Bjorn weighs the heavy cost of sustaining injuries to eliminate the encroaching goblin swarm. Erwin Fornak's ID Tertia provides vital range support to save Bjorn from the swarm. With Erwin Fornak's ID Tertia providing cover, Bjorn Yandel prepares to finish the fight. Bjorn unleashes his raw barbarian fury, challenging the encroaching swarm to face him. Bjorn Yandel sees his efforts translate into tangible growth points. Glistening mana stones represent the hard-earned fruits of their labor. Bjorn calculates the efficiency of their hunt amidst the shadows. Erwin Fornax ID Terja offers the spoils with a bright smile. He remains focused on pushing deeper into the dangerous labyrinth. Bjorn and Erwin quickly realize they are being hunted by swarms of goblins. The situation grows deadlier as a lethal goblin archer joins the fray. Bjorn detects the faint shimmer of hidden magical deception. Erwin stands firm beside him, ready for the incoming assault. Frenzied goblins surge forward, desperate to overwhelm their position. Bjorn crushes a foe beneath the weight of his shield. He unleashes a flurry of strikes while arrows whistle past. Bjorn Yandel swings his heavy hammer with lethal, calculated precision. His eyes narrow, tracking the enemy through the chaotic fray. Bjorn lunges forward, closing the distance to the hidden archer. Tightening his grip, he prepares to deliver a crushing blow. The goblin recoils in sheer terror as death looms overhead. A singular, thunderous impact silences the archer for good. Victory notification flickers, marking another step in his calculated ascent. Darkness settles over the forest as the group pauses briefly. Erwin collapses, her stamina spent from the grueling, endless trek. Bjorn offers his own supplies, showing unexpected consideration for her. Their discarded gear rests silently against the ancient, gnarled tree. He watches over her, surprised by the rhythmic sound of sleep. Her peaceful rest suggests a newfound sense of security within the labyrinth. Bjorn Yandel gazes upward, calculating the cold risks of this relentless, dark expedition. He observes the rival party, noting their diverse composition and formidable combat potential. He tries to remain detached, yet the presence of others fuels his anxiety. Bjorn scans the shadows, his sharp instincts detecting movement in the quiet night. Erwin Fornax ID Terja stirs, forcing him to consider the weight of protection. Her sudden wakefulness catches him off guard, complicating his focus on the mission. Bjorn dismisses her playful vanity, urging her back into the safety of sleep. She settles down obediently, leaving him to ponder her strange, unelf-like demeanor. Bjorn strikes down goblins, carving a path through the relentless, encroaching green tide. Exhaustion claims them both as they survive another brutal day in the wild. The duo confronts the rival party, their blades ready for the inevitable collision. Bjorn Yandel rallies his partner, knowing the labyrinth exit window is rapidly closing. Erwin clings to her exhaustion, dreaming of the rest waiting beyond these walls. Bjorn agrees, prioritizing a safe retreat over the dangerous allure of further exploration. A jagged trap lies in wait, signaling that their path remains treacherous today. Scouts identify a lethal cluster of goblins blocking their inevitable road to freedom. Without hesitation, Bjorn commits them to a final, bloody struggle for the exit. Growling in the shadows, the goblins prepare to defend their territory with ferocity. Steel meets flesh as Bjorn strikes, shattering the silence of the dark forest. He looms like a titan, casting a terrifying shadow over the trembling creatures. Rage ignites in his eyes as a primal shout echoes through the woods. The remaining goblins advance, their footsteps heavy with the weight of impending doom. Bjorn charges into the fray, dismantling the enemy front line with brutal, calculated efficiency. Bjorn delivers a devastating blow, instantly incapacitating the charging goblin with sheer force. Hansu Lee refines his brutal combat style to dominate this chaotic, savage battlefield. A sudden strike from the shadows is effortlessly countered by the hardened warrior. He stands tall, completely unbothered by the distant threat of the goblin archers. Bjorn offers a rare nod of approval to his companion for her performance. Clearing the field of melee threats allows him to focus on survival tactics. Erwin shares her uncertainty, seeking guidance after the heat of the intense skirmish. He validates her caution, knowing that silence is safer than providing false information. Bjorn smugly claims credit for the rapid growth of his young elven ally. Erwin signals a discovery, spotting a glimmer of power amidst the forest carnage. The glowing prize reveals itself as a rare essence from the fallen archer. Hansu eyes the unexpected windfall, realizing their luck has taken a sudden turn. These mystical essences serve as permanent conduits for hidden, lethal power. Hansu Lee meticulously calculates the optimal path for his character's progression. Bjorn Yandel stands stunned before the pulsating, ethereal blue artifact. He breaks into a cold sweat, fearing his own unearned fortune. Erwin Fornax ID Terja questions the transformation, yet he dismisses her fears. A man with a straw hat exemplifies the tactical advantage of essences. Bjorn gauges the elf's desire for the potent, glowing prize. Erwin grins, revealing a newfound, opportunistic hunger for power. Bjorn weighs the heavy cost of past, reckless combat decisions. He demands a binding oath before handing over the essence. A hostile rival party suddenly emerges from the shadows, blocking them. An armored leader points his finger, demanding the treasures they carry. Erwin Fornax ID Terja tries to explain the situation to the hostile intruders. Bjorn Yandel steps in, silencing her with a firm, protective hand on her shoulder. He shoves Erwin aside, triggering a sudden, blinding burst of raw magical energy. The air crackles violently as the essence reacts to his aggressive, calculated touch. An armored leader from the rival party recoils, his face twisting in pure rage. Bjorn stands unmoved while the brilliant light washes over the frustrated, empty-handed group. He shields a shaken Erwin, ensuring the precious prize remains safely in their possession. Hans Olak catches the sudden, ethereal glow illuminating the dark, dense forest canopy. Bjorn gestures toward the rivals, exposing their greedy intent to seize the artifact. A cold, predatory grin spreads across his face as he taunts the opposition. Bjorn advances, inviting the outnumbered foes to test their luck against him today. The rivals hesitate, their confidence crumbling as the barbarian closes the distance. Bjorn Yandel issues a chilling invitation to his trembling, outnumbered adversaries. He looms over the rival party, daring them to choose between death or retreat. Dust kicks up violently as Bjorn Yandel initiates a desperate, high-speed retreat. He urges his companion forward, desperate to reach the safety of the portal. Erwin Fornax ID Terja pauses, her eyes reflecting deep uncertainty about their pursuers. Hostile adventurers glare at them, their frustration mounting as the pair slips away. Bjorn analyzes the enemy formation, deducing their tactical intent to abandon the floor. He explains that these hunters were merely biding their time near the exit. A sudden, sharp instinct forces Erwin to flinch, sensing a shift in danger. Bjorn detects a goblin horde closing in, forcing a change in their trajectory. Panic registers on Erwin's face as she confirms the monsters are aggressively advancing. Shock ripples through Bjorn, realizing their usual stealth tactics have completely failed them. He pivots sharply, leading the way into the unknown to evade the ambush. Erwin follows his lead, her senses heightened as they plunge deeper into peril. Bjorn Yandel lunges, pulling Erwin out of the trajectory of a lethal projectile. Cold sweat beads on his brow as he identifies the calculated, non-goblin origin. He recognizes the malicious intent of their rivals, realizing they are being hunted. These scavengers have clearly baited the horde to finish them off from afar. Bjorn roars for Erwin to stop running and unleash her newfound, hidden potential. Confusion clouds her gaze as she struggles to comprehend his urgent tactical demand. He explains how the essence she absorbed holds far more than mere stats. A spectral entity manifests, signaling the awakening of her true, dormant combat power. System windows reveal the path to survival through specific, powerful class-based abilities. Poisonous strikes and silent movement now define her lethal new repertoire of skills. Bjorn coaches her through the interface, guiding her hand toward the activation trigger. Erwin vanishes into the shadows, perfectly executing her first stealthy, ghostly maneuver. Bjorn Yandel marvels at the intuitive nature of his companion's newfound stealth ability. He hands over a crucial supply, trusting her to master this ghostly form. The warrior prepares to draw fire, shifting the burden of the hunt entirely. Erwin hesitates, her eyes reflecting the genuine peril of his reckless, solo strategy. Bjorn demands absolute precision, knowing a single missed shot spells certain, icy doom. They break into a sprint, leaving the confused elf scrambling to understand him. Stopping abruptly, the barbarian marks his territory against the encroaching, unseen enemy threat. Bjorn readies his heavy hammer, his low growl signaling the start of violence. Goblins emerge from the shadows, their jagged blades gleaming with a lethal hunger. He charges forward, desperate to bait the hidden marksman into a fatal mistake. The barbarian swings with fury, carving a path through the screeching, green tide. Steel meets flesh as the battlefield erupts in a rhythmic, brutal percussion. Bjorn Yandel swings his heavy hammer, shattering the line of encroaching, hostile goblins. He crushes a foe with brutal force, yet the relentless tide refuses to break. The warrior raises his shield just in time, realizing his tactical assessment was flawed. A sudden, chilling realization flashes across his eyes as the danger intensifies further. A lethal strike from the shadows forces him into a desperate, defensive struggle. He grunts in pain, forced to parry constant blows while surrounded by enemies. Bjorn feels the weight of isolation, fighting without the tactical support of Erwin. Blood trickles down his face as the mounting injuries begin to sap his strength. His hammer strikes the earth with a heavy thud, marking his waning physical resolve. Kneeling in the dirt, he gasps for air while his stamina reserves rapidly deplete. His eyes widen in sheer terror as a new, unseen threat suddenly emerges. Two lethal projectiles streak through the air, converging on his position simultaneously. Bjorn Yandel identifies the lethal source of the incoming barrage of projectiles. Panic gives way to calculated, cold-blooded focus in his desperate eyes. A screeching clash of steel echoes as he deflects the deadly bolt. He pivots mid-air, risking everything to survive the relentless assault of goblins. Agony flares as a stray arrow bites deep into his exposed elbow. Numbness spreads rapidly, a telltale sign of the foul toxin coursing through him. His hammer slips from a failing grip, forcing a brutal tactical reassessment. Bjorn sacrifices his offensive potential to prioritize the ultimate defensive bulwark. He lunges forward, transforming his shield into a lethal instrument of war. The heavy metal rim smashes into his foe, buying him precious seconds. Explosive force ripples through the fray as he clears a path forward. With a final, thunderous impact, the remaining goblins are sent reeling back. Exhaustion clouds Bjorn Yandel as he stares down the endless, encroaching goblin tide. Surrounded by a crimson aura, he digs deep to summon his remaining strength. Goblins circle him like starving wolves, their jagged blades hungry for his blood. Bjorn wipes away the grime, choosing to conserve energy rather than pursue shadows. Sudden movement from the dense foliage signals that he is not truly alone. The armored warrior steps forward, his presence cutting through the heavy, stagnant air. Bjorn demands the location of his missing target, his voice a low growl. The armored warrior sneers, his blades held ready as he mocks the barbarian. A flash of pure rage ignites in his eyes as he prepares for combat. The armored warrior hesitates, clearly shaken by the sheer ferocity of his opponent. He notes the blood staining the barbarian's armor with a twisted, predatory grin. Bjorn lets out a dark, calculated chuckle, already planning his next lethal move. The chief and his subordinates surround Bjorn Yandel with lethal, cold-blooded intent. The chief warns his men to treat the barbarian as a dangerous beast. With a savage roar, the enemy closes the gap to crush their target. Bjorn assesses his wounded arm while desperately searching for a way to signal Erwin. He thrusts a finger toward the sky, crafting a strange, unmistakable beacon of defiance. A chilling grin spreads across his face as the trap finally snaps shut. Confusion ripples through the ranks as the unexpected signal cuts through the night. Bjorn Yandel stands firm, his glowing finger cutting a path through the dark. Trusting his ally, he hurls himself into the fray with unwavering, desperate resolve. His shield connects with a thunderous impact, shattering the enemy's defensive formation instantly. The warrior in the conical hat grimaces as his blade grinds against the shield. The older man in a straw hat parries, his blade ringing against the steel. Sparks erupt as a heavy strike grazes Bjorn, testing his physical endurance once more. He presses the advantage, refusing to cede ground despite the mounting pressure around him. Swinging with calculated precision, he forces his foes to focus solely on him. Bjorn holds the line, though a haunting doubt flickers in his focused mind. Wide eyes widen in realization as the final piece of the puzzle clicks. A lethal projectile whistles through the air, signaling the true turn of battle. Bjorn Yandel and his allies freeze as the lethal projectile screams toward them. Panic ripples through the group while they frantically identify the incoming death blow. The armored warrior intercepts the strike, shielding the party from sudden, sharp destruction. He barks a sharp command, seizing control of the chaotic and shifting battlefield. With a defiant smirk, the armored warrior bats away another incoming, deadly shaft. Bjorn Yandel studies the tactical display, his mind calculating the cost of survival. He lunges forward, desperate to close the distance before his defenses completely crumble. A metallic ring echoes as the warrior in a conical hat strikes back. The man in the straw hat accelerates, closing in for a final, decisive blow. Blood sprays the air as Bjorn accepts a brutal wound to secure his opening. He ignores the searing pain, his focus locked entirely on the target ahead. Bjorn drives his shield forward, catching the warrior in a brutal, decisive collision. Bjorn Yandel slams his shield into the warrior with bone-crushing force. Disbelief flashes across the opponent's face as Bjorn stares with predatory intensity. The warrior in a conical hat frantically retreats to gain some distance. Bjorn slides across the dirt, his eyes never leaving his fleeing target. A sudden realization of danger dawns on the man in the hat. The armored warrior steps in, deflecting incoming projectiles with his sturdy shield. Flames erupt against the steel as the armored warrior praises Erwin's intervention. Bjorn launches himself mid-air, ready to capitalize on the chaos unfolding below. An arrow finds its mark, forcing the armored warrior to stumble back. Steel rings against steel while the armored warrior struggles to remain upright. Heavy breathing escapes the armored warrior as he senses his impending doom. Frustration boils over because Bjorn cannot pursue the enemy through the thicket. Bjorn Yandel stands firm against the relentless onslaught of his conical-hatted foe. Dust kicks up as heavy boots grind against the unforgiving forest floor. A swift arc of steel meets the sturdy surface of the shield. Eyes widen in sudden, chilling realization as the tide begins to turn. Bjorn drives his shield forward with the raw, crushing force of a barbarian. The warrior in a conical hat is sent reeling into the dark undergrowth. Steel sparks fly as the bald warrior intercepts a desperate, sweeping strike. He surveys the battlefield, calculating the threat posed by this new, dangerous opponent. Clashing weapons create a rhythmic, deadly dance between two seasoned combatants. Bjorn stares down his enemy, his gaze burning with cold, predatory intuition. A deceptive feint shifts the momentum of the duel in a heartbeat. The brutal impact lands true, shattering his opponent's defense with decisive, crushing power. Bjorn Yandel seizes his opponent by the throat with a lethal, iron grip. Exhaustion washes over Bjorn as he stares down the now broken, gasping warrior. Without hesitation, he drives his shield into the warrior in a conical hat. Desperation twists Bjorn's face as he realizes the sheer intensity of the struggle. The crushing weight of defeat threatens to overwhelm his resolve in this moment. He refuses to surrender, clawing back against the encroaching darkness of his exhaustion. Bjorn lunges forward, sinking his teeth into his enemy to secure his survival. Standing over the fallen form, he surveys the aftermath of his brutal victory. Spitting out blood, Bjorn catches his breath while the adrenaline slowly begins fading. Erwin Fornax ID Terja rushes toward him, her eyes wide with visible, frantic concern. She scans his injuries, relieved that her own battles concluded with similar success. Erwin offers a healing potion, urging Bjorn to recover from his grievous wounds. Erwin insists that the potion is vital for purging the poison within him. The empty vial clatters to the ground, signaling the start of his recovery. Bjorn gasps for air as a violent, red aura surges through his body. Agony contorts his face while his internal organs burn from the potent brew. Erwin watches anxiously, her voice trembling as she questions their dwindling survival time. They realize that 40 minutes is far too brief for a proper rest. Bjorn abruptly instructs Erwin to strip the fallen, leaving her completely stunned. He quickly clarifies that he only requires the adventurer's gear, not her attire. The countdown looms overhead, reminding them that the labyrinth floor is closing fast. Bjorn and Erwin prioritize salvaging essential gear before the labyrinth floor shuts down. Erwin returns with the scavenged spoils, her movements frantic as the seconds tick. With the timer spiraling downward, the pair retreats before the exit vanishes entirely. Bjorn Yandel and Erwin spot their salvation glowing amidst the encroaching darkness. They plunge into the swirling energy, escaping the labyrinth's final, crushing grasp. Bjorn and Erwin Fornax ID Terja emerge from the portal into the labyrinth's depths. Bjorn gasps for air while his companion celebrates their narrow, miraculous survival. Erwin beams with unbridled joy, relief washing over her bright, elven features. He wipes grime from his face, acknowledging how close death truly came. The pair quickly pivots to the pressing matter of their previous agreement. Bjorn racks his weary brain, struggling to recall the crucial location details. Seconds bleed away as the urgency of their departure intensifies the pressure. Frustration mounts as the name of the tavern stubbornly eludes his memory. He clutches his head, desperate to conjure the information before time expires. A sudden spark of clarity hits, and he finally shouts the destination. The final second ticks away, signaling the end of their desperate race. A cold system announcement confirms the labyrinth gate has officially slammed shut. Reality bends as the survivors are forcibly pulled toward their new destination. The towering spires of Rafdonia emerge, bathed in an ethereal, blinding light. Bjorn Yandel exhales a ragged breath, his body finally free from the labyrinth. He stares ahead with hardened resolve, acknowledging the long road he has traveled. Bjorn stands before the city gates, ready to claim his place in Rafdonia. Bjorn Yandel ponders the strange temporal anomalies plaguing those returning from the labyrinth. He navigates the suffocating density of the city square, searching for a moment's peace. Bjorn checks his timepiece, confirming the unsettling reality of their staggered, mysterious return. Suddenly, a boisterous barbarian cries out, forcing him to scramble for a forgotten name. He clasps arms with Karak, finally recalling the identity of his loud, energetic comrade. Karak beams with genuine relief, clearly overjoyed to find his companion still breathing. The surrounding barbarians erupt into a cacophony of boastful tales and ego-driven chatter. Exhaustion washes over Bjorn as he endures the overwhelming intensity of this unexpected reunion. The group surges toward the inspection office, eager to flaunt their hard-won bloody spoils. Reluctantly, he follows the boisterous crowd, masking his growing annoyance with a forced composure. The appraiser calmly tallies the massive haul, her eyes fixed on the shimmering stones. Cheers erupt as Karak claims his victory, leaving Bjorn to observe the spectacle silently. Heavy pouches overflow with the glimmering, raw potential of mana-infused stones. The appraiser moves with lethal efficiency, her hands blurring across the scale. Bjorn Yandel stands firm as the final, staggering tally is officially declared. A roar of disbelief surges through the crowd at the historic hall. Bjorn looms over his peers, fully armored in his hard-won, blood-stained spoils. Adulation washes over him as the warriors celebrate his unprecedented rise today. A calculated grin betrays his secret, for he is no ordinary barbarian. He thrusts his massive warhammer toward the rafters, basking in primal glory. The ecstatic mob tosses Bjorn skyward until a sharp rebuke silences them. Outside, the city dwellers watch the commotion with tired, familiar disdain. Restless murmurs fill the courtyard while the warriors regroup for departure. Bjorn chooses patience, waiting for his companions to finalize their next move. Bjorn Yandel scans the courtyard and spots a familiar group of elves. He recognizes Erwin Fornaxi D. Terja amidst the crowd of travelers. The elven party discusses arcane tactics while standing in plain sight. A boastful man mocks Bjorn for his proximity to the elven group. Erwin catches his gaze and offers a subtle, inviting gesture. They exchange a hushed, clandestine agreement to meet under cover of night. Daria Whitember D. Terja immediately presses her sister for an explanation. The loudmouth confronts Bjorn, demanding he justify his interest in her. He sneers, convinced that the barbarian has no connection to elves. The man bellows insults, questioning the honor of any warrior near them. Daria stiffens as the aggressive shouting draws unwanted attention to them. Bjorn feels the weight of the situation tightening around his throat. Tension spikes as the barbarians and elves cross paths in the crowded camp. Two hulking, tattooed warriors storm forward, their presence radiating pure, unadulterated aggression. Bjorn Yandel rallies his companions, eager to escape the stifling pressure of the crowd. Bloodstained boots trudge through the dirt, marking the grim reality of their recent trials. A small child spots her father, breaking the heavy silence with a desperate cry. The weary man embraces his child, finding a brief sanctuary in the emotional reunion. Tears stream down faces as brothers and kin finally reconnect after the brutal expedition. A woman confronts a soldier, her frantic questions shattering the joy of the homecoming. The innocent girl searches for her sibling, unaware of the tragedy lurking nearby. Darkness descends as the camp is consumed by a wave of crushing, silent misery. A grieving survivor collapses, haunted by the crushing weight of his impossible choices. Hansu Lee reflects on the bitter memories forged within his digital purgatory. Bjorn Yandel navigates the somber crowd, surrounded by echoes of raw, unfiltered grief. Real-world stakes weigh heavily, far beyond the limitations of any programmed digital experience. He stares into the void, deeply unsettled by the authentic suffering before him. A wooden mug rises, attempting to drown the lingering shadows in bitter ale. Einar joins him, both warriors seeking solace in the numbing rhythm of intoxication. Bjorn remains detached, questioning the hollow celebration amidst such profound tribal loss. Disgust washes over him as the surrounding revelry feels increasingly meaningless and empty. He rises abruptly, his departure catching the nearby barbarians completely off guard. Panic flares within him, fearing that his newfound fame might turn into a cage. Bjorn strides away, leaving the clamor of the camp to preserve his freedom. Sunlight bathes the settlement, masking the underlying rot with a deceptive, golden facade. He moves quickly, desperate to outpace the suffocating expectations of his growing legend. Bjorn Yandel observes the calm streets, finding a rare moment of quiet reflection. The bustling town life hums with a mundane normalcy that feels surprisingly refreshing here. He walks past the market stalls, noting the structured peace of this strange environment. His calloused hand grips a cloth, grounding him as he navigates his complex reality. Bjorn steps through the wooden threshold, leaving the chaotic outside world behind for now. Beyond the door lies a sanctuary, a small space where he can finally breathe. Water cascades over his tattooed skin, washing away the grime of his brutal life. He finds himself genuinely surprised by the comfort this modest shelter provides to him. Exhaustion claims him as he collapses onto the bed, surrendering to the soft mattress. Bjorn bites his hand, the sharp sting a bitter reminder of his true identity. A crushing weight of homesickness settles over him, piercing through his hardened barbarian facade. The hollow ache of isolation remains, even though his original life feels worlds away. Night falls over the city, bathing the structures in cold moonlight. Bjorn Yandel shakes off his slumber as the late hour arrives. He calculates the passage of time since leaving the dangerous labyrinth. An elderly man clutching produce crosses paths with the confused barbarian. The local explains how financial ruin dismantled a once thriving establishment. Bjorn grapples with the chilling truth that his timeline is misaligned. He stares at the building, verifying the name from his memories. Searching for answers, he considers scouring archives for hidden historical truths. Bjorn steps into the tavern, scanning the chaos for his ally. Erwin waves him over, accompanied by a stranger with piercing eyes. Daria Whitember D. Tertia levels an icy, scrutinizing gaze at him. He stands his ground, demanding the identity of his sudden adversary. Bjorn finds the mysterious woman's refusal to share her name highly suspicious. Daria Whitember D. Tertia slams the table, demanding clarity on his true intentions. He counters the aggression by questioning her presence in such a dangerous establishment. Her eyes flare with a burning, intense hostility as she prepares her rebuttal. The interrogation deepens, centering on his secret, late-night rendezvous with her sister. The bustling tavern hums with the restless energy of seasoned adventurers seeking respite. Daria Whitember D. Tertia glares with icy intensity, leaving Erwin visibly shaken and trembling. Bjorn Yandel looms over the table, his confusion cutting through the heavy, suffocating atmosphere. Daria stares him down, her sharp eyes searching for any sign of practiced deception. Bjorn leans into the conversation, his massive frame dwarfing the table during their exchange. Disbelief washes over Bjorn as the gravity of his extended slumber finally hits him. Panic flares in his eyes, beads of sweat betraying his internal, frantic mental calculations. A sudden, crushing realization leaves Bjorn stunned by his own unintentional, day-long recovery period. Erwin looks on, her expression softening into bewilderment as he offers a sincere apology. Bjorn crosses his arms, admitting his total lapse in time with a humbled tone. Shock ripples through the sisters as his strange choice of words catches them off guard. Daria dismisses his quirkiness, her gaze hardening as she demands the true, hidden motive. Bjorn Yandel shuts down further questioning with a cold, impenetrable wall of silence. Daria Whitember D. Tertia bristles, her composure shattering into a fit of indignant rage. He warns her to watch her tone if she values Erwin Fornaxi D. Tertia. A heavy pouch hits the table, signaling the start of a cold transaction. Bjorn slides the payment across, settling the debt for the consumed magical essence. Daria lashes out, knocking the money aside in a desperate attempt to intervene. She demands to know why he hesitates, sensing a shift in his demeanor. The sister locks eyes with him, convinced she has finally exposed his scheme. Bjorn pivots his attention toward Erwin, seeking her consent for his bold proposal. A moment of heavy silence hangs in the air before he speaks again. Erwin stares in disbelief as he offers a simple, lucrative partnership split evenly. Her face lights up with pure, unadulterated joy at the unexpected opportunity presented. Erwin Fornaxi D. Tertia freezes, her eyes widening at his sudden, bold proposition. Bjorn Yandel faces the sisters, his expression masking a calculated, tactical irritation. Daria Whitember D. Tertia asserts her authority, pulling her sister away from his influence. Cold calculation flickers in Daria's gaze as she justifies her protective, controlling nature. Bjorn internalizes the harsh reality of the social hierarchy ruling this savage camp. A heavy pouch slides across the table, signaling a cold, transactional power play. Bjorn refuses to back down, demanding the fair share he is rightfully owed. Daria offers a smug, mocking smile, clearly underestimating his resolve and hidden depth. Bjorn slams the required payment down, his patience wearing thin with her games. Sweat beads on his brow as he struggles to maintain his carefully crafted composure. Daria grips his arm, desperate to maintain her hold over her sister's choices. Erwin looks on, her eyes shimmering with newfound hope for their secret alliance. Daria Whitember D. Tertia eyes him with a sharp, calculated sense of maturity. She points an accusing finger, demanding a solemn vow from Bjorn Yandel. Daria issues a fierce ultimatum, intent on keeping the barbarian away from Erwin. Erwin flushes with embarrassment, while Bjorn tests the limits of Daria's strict conditions. Impatience radiates from Daria as she forces a final commitment from the warrior. Bjorn strikes his chest, feigning a warrior's oath to appease the protective sister. Daria turns to depart, leaving a desperate Erwin reaching out for her sibling. A sudden pause stops Daria, as if a final thought strikes her mind. She glances back, offering Bjorn a rare, genuine acknowledgement for his recent actions. Bjorn exhales a heavy breath while a weary Erwin slumps against the table. Erwin frets over her uncharacteristic defiance, fearing the weight of her sister's disapproval. Bjorn dismisses her anxieties, assuring her that Daria's departure was far from hostile. Erwin regretfully explains her prior commitments prevent a new partnership with Bjorn. Bjorn Yandel calmly brushes off the apology with a thoughtful, analytical expression. She slides the heavy loot bags across the table toward him. Erwin gestures enthusiastically, inviting him to inspect the remaining spoils tomorrow. The tavern atmosphere shifts as she asks how to repay his kindness. She insists on providing compensation, unaware of the specific oaths binding her. Bjorn observes her, his profile sharp against the ambient tavern glow. He redirects the conversation, suggesting a meal to break the tension. Erwin declines the food, leaving him to handle the order alone. A sudden change in her demeanor captures his complete, undivided attention. She abruptly stands, leaning forward to propose a celebratory drink together. Bjorn recognizes the familiar mechanics of a celebration event from his game. Erwin insists on a proper show of gratitude for their shared survival. She beams with warmth, eager to solidify their newfound, fragile bond together. Bjorn Yandel questions her logic, challenging the premise of this celebratory ritual. Confusion erupts as they realize their expectations for this meeting are misaligned. Bjorn offers a knowing smirk, hiding his true intentions behind a facade. A spread of hearty tavern fare waits, setting the stage for manipulation. Erwin raises her mug high, genuinely appreciative of his role in survival. Bjorn Yandel joins the toast, his eyes cold despite the friendly smile. Wooden mugs collide, sealing an alliance built on deception and hidden agendas. She chatters away, oblivious to the calculated game unfolding before her eyes. Bjorn drains his drink aggressively, eager to pivot toward his own interests. He leans in, finally ready to collect on the debt she owes. Erwin brushes her hair back, her curiosity piqued by his sudden, intense shift. Bjorn looms over her, closing the distance to ensure their conversation remains private. Stunned by his proximity, Erwin feels the heat rising sharply in her cheeks. She leans into the intrigue, fully embracing the dangerous game he has proposed.